Most people drain themselves completely trying to manage how others perceive their struggle. They craft explanations, they seek sympathy, they need the narrative to be fair. The Stoic understands that the narrative belongs to whoever does the work, not to whoever watches it. Stay silent. Keep building. The results will speak with a clarity that no explanation ever could. When life becomes difficult, the instinct to seek sympathy is deeply human. There is nothing wrong with needing support. There is nothing weak about leaning on people who genuinely care. But there is a version of sympathy seeking that quietly destroys people. And most of them never recognize it while it is happening. It begins with a reasonable need. You are struggling. Things are hard. You want to be understood. So you share your situation, your setbacks, your obstacles, your exhaustion. And something about the response feels good. The attention, the concern, the sense that people see your difficulty. For a moment, the struggle feels lighter because it has been acknowledged. But then the moment passes, and the struggle remains exactly as heavy as before. Nothing has changed except the amount of energy you spent seeking relief from people who could not provide it. Seneca warned about this constantly. He observed that most people who seek sympathy do not actually want solutions. They want their suffering to be witnessed. They want the watching crowd to confirm that their struggle is real, significant, and worthy of attention. And the crowd will give them that confirmation. For a while. But there is a cost that compounds silently beneath the surface. Every time you perform your struggle for external validation, you strengthen the identity of someone who is struggling. You rehearse the story of your own difficulty until it becomes the defining narrative of how you see yourself. Slowly, without realizing it, the struggle stops being something you are going through and becomes something you are. The Stoics practiced something radically different. They processed difficulty internally. They journaled. They reflected. They examined their own thinking. They sought counsel from the few people capable of offering genuine wisdom. But they did not perform their pain for crowds who were watching out of curiosity rather than care. There is a difference between the friend who sits with you in difficulty because they genuinely want to help you through it, and the audience that watches your struggle because your difficulty entertains, comforts, or distracts them. One deserves your vulnerability, the other deserves your silence. Learning to tell the difference is one of the most important things a person can do for their own survival. This chapter will be uncomfortable, but the Stoics were never interested in comfortable lies. They were interested in useful truth. And here is a truth that most people feel, but rarely say out loud. Some of the people who watched you struggle were quietly hoping you would not recover. Not because they are evil, not because they consciously wished you harm, but because human beings are deeply, almost invisibly, comparative creatures. And your struggle was doing something for them that your success will threaten. It was making them feel better about their own unlived life. When you were failing, their inaction felt justified. When you were drowning, their mediocrity felt reasonable. When you were lost, their stagnation felt safe. Your struggle was, without you ever intending it, a permission slip for everyone watching to remain exactly where they were. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about the nature of people who diminish others not out of malice but out of fear. Fear that someone else's success will expose the choices they have been avoiding. Fear that watching someone rise from difficulty will remove the last excuse they had for remaining still. Understanding this changes how the watching eyes feel. They are not watching because you are weak. They are watching because you are moving. And movement, even painful movement toward an uncertain destination, terrifies people who have convinced themselves that staying still is the same as staying safe. Your struggle unsettled them, because even in difficulty, you were trying. And trying, even imperfectly, even with visible pain, is something they quietly abandoned long ago. This is not a reason for contempt. The Stoics did not believe in looking down on people who were consumed by their own fear and comparison. But it is a reason for clarity. The people who needed you to fail are not your judges. They are not your critics. They are not even your competition. They are simply people who chose the sideline and are now watching, with a complicated mixture of hope and dread, to see whether someone who chose the field will make it to the end. Stay on the field. Say nothing. Let them watch. There is a certain season in every meaningful journey that nobody talks about, honestly. They saw you fall. They watched you struggle in silence. Some of them smiled, some of them whispered, some of them waited, certain you would never recover. And you said nothing. Not because you were weak, but because something inside you had already decided. You were not going to argue with people watching from the sidelines. You were going to make them witnesses to something else entirely. This is not a video about revenge. This is not about proving people wrong out of anger. This is about something far more powerful. This is about what happens to a person who chooses silence over explanation, discipline over desperation, and patient work over the need to be understood. The Stoics called it the highest form of strength. Most people spend their entire lives never discovering it. Stay with me. Because by the end of this, the way you carry your struggle will never be the same again. There is a certain kind of person who appears during your lowest moments. They do not arrive with help. They do not arrive with encouragement. They arrive with observation, quietly watching, silently measuring, calculating whether you will make it or collapse entirely. You have felt them. The co-worker who watched your project fail and said nothing useful. The friend who knew you were struggling and offered advice that felt more like judgment. The family member who raised an eyebrow instead of a hand. The people who followed your story closely, not because they were rooting for you, but because your struggle made their own mediocrity feel more comfortable. Most people react to this audience in one of two ways. The first reaction is anger. They perform their pain loudly, demanding that the watching crowd acknowledge the difficulty of the climb. They post, they explain, they defend. They need the audience to understand how hard things have been. And in doing so, they give that audience exactly what it came for: emotional access. The second reaction is collapse. The weight of being watched during weakness becomes unbearable. Shame compounds the struggle. A person begins believing what the watching eyes seem to suggest, that the difficulty is permanent, that the failure is final, that the struggle defines them. The Stoics offered a third path, one that most people never consider because it requires something deeply uncomfortable: silence. Not the silence of someone who has given up, the silence of someone who has decided that their energy belongs entirely to the work ahead, and not one single drop of it will be wasted on an audience that never deserved a performance. Marcus Aurelius governed the most powerful empire in the ancient world. He faced betrayal, military disaster, plague, and personal loss. And through all of it, he returned again and again to the same quiet truth. The opinion of the crowd changes nothing about the quality of your character. It changes nothing about what you are capable of building. and it deserves none of the mental energy that most people surrender to it freely. The moment you understand this, really understand it, not just intellectually but in your bones, the audience loses its power. They are still watching, but you have stopped performing for them, and that changes everything. Most people misunderstand silence. They believe that staying quiet during difficulty communicates weakness. They believe that not defending yourself means accepting defeat. They believe that refusing to explain your struggles to people who never asked sincerely is somehow a failure of self-expression. They are wrong. Silence communicates something that words never could. When a person continues working quietly while others watch and wait for collapse, that silence announces something. It announces that the opinions of the watching crowd have not been granted entry into the mind of the person working. That is not weakness. That is a boundary that most people never manage to build. Think about the people in your life who carry the most genuine authority. Not the loudest people, not the most defensive people, the ones who move through difficulty with a kind of unhurried steadiness, the ones who do not flinch when criticized, the ones who do not perform their pain for validation. There is something about their silence that creates presence, something that makes you sense, without being told, that this person cannot be easily shaken. Epictetus taught that true freedom begins the moment a person stops needing the outside world to confirm their worth. And silence is one of the clearest expressions of that freedom. Because when you stop explaining yourself to people who were never genuinely listening, when you stop defending your path to people who never intended to walk beside you, you reclaim something precious. The mental and emotional energy that was being continuously drained by the need for understanding, approval, and validation returns to you. And that energy, redirected toward your actual work, becomes extraordinary. It is the season before results become visible. The season when you have already made the decision, already begun the work, already committed to the direction, but nothing on the outside has changed yet. To the watching eyes, you still look the same. The struggle still appears unresolved. The outcome still looks uncertain, but inside, something has shifted permanently. The Stoics called this period the foundation, and they understood something about foundations that most people who have never built anything significant fail to grasp. The foundation is where all the real work happens. It is invisible, it is unglamorous, it is slow, and it requires a discipline that cannot be motivated by external validation, because external validation has not yet arrived. This is where most people abandon their journey, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack talent, because they cannot tolerate the silence of invisible progress in a world that rewards visible performance. They need to see results before they believe in the process. They need confirmation from the watching crowd before they trust the direction they have chosen. And when that confirmation does not come, when the audience continues watching with skepticism, and the results continue refusing to arrive on schedule, the temptation to abandon the work becomes overwhelming. Epictetus taught that discipline is not the ability to work hard when results are flowing. Discipline is the ability to continue working with the same quality and commitment when nothing visible has changed yet. That is the discipline that separates the people who eventually win from the people who almost won before they stopped. Do the work when nobody is watching. Do the work when nobody is impressed. Do the work when your own mind begins questioning the point. Because the invisible seasons are not empty, they are accumulating. Every day of quiet work is adding weight to a foundation that, When the time arrives, nothing will be able to shake. They watched you struggle through the invisible season. They will watch you emerge from it. And the distance between those two moments, that silent, invisible, unglamorous, disciplined distance, is exactly where your victory was built. The modern world has confused silence with passivity. People are expected to announce their goals publicly, document their journey visibly, defend their choices loudly, and respond to every criticism instantly. Visibility has become confused with progress. Noise has become confused with action. Reaction has become confused with strength. And so when a person chooses silence, when they stop explaining their path, stop defending their decisions, stop performing their effort for an audience, the world tends to interpret that silence as defeat. They assume you have nothing to say because you have nothing happening. They are wrong. The most dangerous players in any room are rarely the loudest ones. They are the ones you cannot read, the ones whose reactions you cannot predict, the ones who receive criticism without flinching, absorb pressure without cracking, and continue moving in a direction that external opinion has been completely unable to influence. Silence, practiced with intention, is not absence. It is armor. It prevents the people watching from understanding your strategy. It protects your energy from being drained by unnecessary conflict. It forces the watching crowd to fill the silence with their own imagination, and imagination, in the absence of information, almost always overestimates what it cannot see. Seneca observed that people fear what they cannot understand, and they cannot understand a person who refuses to be emotionally moved by their watching and waiting. When you stay silent during struggle, something shifts in the dynamic. The people who expected your collapse begin to feel uncertain. The ones who were comfortable with your difficulty begin to sense that the narrative they had written for you may not be the one that actually unfolds. And that uncertainty, that quiet, growing uncertainty in the minds of the watching crowd, is more powerful than any argument you could have made, any explanation you could have offered, any defense you could have constructed. Silence, held long enough, becomes a statement more powerful than words. Most people imagine their victory as a moment, a dramatic arrival, a public reversal. The watching crowd forced to acknowledge what they doubted, dismissed, or quietly hoped would never come. And sometimes it does look like that. Sometimes the victory is visible and undeniable, and the silence you kept during the struggle suddenly speaks louder than anything you could have said. But the Stoics understood something deeper about winning. The real victory rarely lives in the moment the crowd finally sees it. The real victory happens earlier, much earlier. It happens the first time you chose work over explanation.